I look at connecting as about meeting other people and being in the same room as greatness. Because I remember years ago I went to NAR in the States and Bill Clinton was on the stage. I needed binoculars. I was that far back. I was like 200 metres back because the room was huge. But bottom line was I felt being in the same room as an iconic person, and I thought, wow, this kind of feels like my life is changing. And I think AREC's like that. When you're in a room and there's James Tostovan in the front row and there's Gavin Rubinstein at the coffee station and so forth, you're listening to these great people and you rub shoulders with Tommy Panos and Matt Steinway. When all this stuff happens, I think there is an opportunity in that physical space and energetic space to leverage that to change your life.
You're listening to Elevate, the official podcast of Elite Agent magazine for real estate industry sales professionals, property managers, and leaders. Each episode, we bring you behind-the-scenes coaching, news analysis, exclusive interviews, technology, and more to help you list more, sell more, and elevate your results. To subscribe to the magazine, visit eliteagent.com.au/subscribe. Here is your host, Samantha McLean.
How much has really changed in real estate since 2003? This week, our podcast guest is someone who really needs no introduction. It's a warm welcome back to John McGrath. John and I caught up to talk about this year's AREC conference, winning in the current market, the future, and what's changed since he wrote the classic book, You Inc. back in 2003. The average house price in Sydney back then was less than $500,000, so that's changed, and technology has changed. But if you want to supercharge your business, many of the principles of You Inc. still apply. But you'll have to listen into this podcast to find out what they are. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to the podcast, John McGrath.
Thanks, Sam. Good to be here again.
It's been roughly a year since we last caught up, and a lot has changed in the market again in 12 months. It's remarkable how much changes in the real estate industry. So how's the last year been for you and for McGrath?
Well, look, I think like the entire industry, in most of the markets we are in, Sam, it's been a pretty major shift. I guess when you look at it, price, I think in many of our markets is actually down 20%. So that's pretty significant. You look at the last 9 market cycles and corrections, that's the second highest downward shift in any of those cycles. And the major one, which I kind of see was an outlier, was 80 to 83, where interest rates are at 17, 18%. So it's kind of, as we look back, not hard to see why that was pretty atrocious. I think that's been the major area of focus, not focusing on the correction, but focusing how do you move within that and continue to grow your business. And I think that's what we're coaching with our agents. And interestingly, our philosophy, Sam, is one is the market doesn't matter. It's what are you doing in the market? And our best agents, I was talking to Cindy Kennedy last week. She just sold 8 properties in the last 2 weeks. That's world class in any market, in any city, at any time, in any part of the cycle. Pete Chauncey last October, November sold 30 properties in 2 months. So there's no doubt if you can block out the noise, we know where the market's at. We know the market's shifted. It went up 60, 70, 80%. It's come back 10, 15, 20. That is where it's at. So let's just price the property in line with where it's at. Or let's actually check whether you really want to sell and if it makes sense. Because for some people, selling at the new adjusted rate won't make sense. Not many, because most people are trading up, down, sideways. So the market shifts, so do they. So we've been putting a lot of attention over the last 12 months into just getting our agents' mindsets right. It's like a daily conversation, one-on-one, SMSs, webinars, small forum groups, town hall groups. But ultimately, we've been seeing that the results of a lot of our agents have actually got better, not worse, as the market's contracted. And that's our kind of goal, that you keep getting better no matter what's happening externally.
What do you reckon the number one skill is for an agent?
Right now? Hard to pin down to one. A couple of things come to mind. Having real conversations, but real conversations that don't feel like they're negative. Because if I'm a vendor, I don't want you to come in and say, hey, Sam, the market's really shit. I've got to tell you, unless you're desperate to sell, I reckon you're wasting your time. That's a slightly exaggerated, but a lot of agents are walking in and sending that energy out. You've got to be positive. And it's got to sound like, Sam, look, the market's the market. It is where it's at. So as long as we align with where the market's at, why don't you tell me why you think you're selling? And then let's go through and let's work out what's on the other side of the transaction. And then let's work out if it really makes sense. And if it does, what's the best process to maximize your price? Because even in a market that's corrected down 20%, you can still maximize your price. So it's just your price is not going to be what it was 18 months ago, but it can still be the best it can be today. So it's how do you straddle that and have a foot in both camps of you've got to be pragmatic and realistic and fact-driven, but you've also got to be optimistic and give people a sense that they're dealing with someone that hasn't given up. So I think that's the key thing, and not bullshit in the middle of that, because some agents, they're closing their eyes, they're telling a silly figure and they're hoping that someone will eventually choose to sell. There's a lot of agents out there that are going to leave the industry, have left and will continue to leave, those that aren't getting the managing expectations message. So I think it's managing expectations and coming in and being able to be both pragmatic and positive and optimistic as well at the same time, and dealing with your own mindset, because right now, you don't need to travel far to hear lots of bad news. This actually takes an effort to block out the negative stuff, because I'd rather you say, geez, I heard on a podcast of Sam the other day that Pete Chauncey sold 30 properties in 2 months. That sounds pretty good. And I heard Cindy Kennedy just sold 8. And I'm sure if we interviewed Tommy Hector in Adelaide, he's probably sold 12 or 15 last month.
One a day in March, I hear.
One a day in March, yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And it's not sugarcoating. The reality is those people are getting extraordinary results. Now, reality might also be 75, 80% of the industry is just surviving. But I want to know what the 20% are doing, which is why, things like your podcast and your magazine and AREC, these are incredibly valuable tools because they will tell you about the good stuff that's happening. And if you focus on the good stuff and you unpack it and you say, okay, well, what is Chauncey doing? What is Tommy Hector doing? How did Cindy sell 8 last month or in the last couple of weeks? That sort of stuff will guide you down the right path. Long answer to a short question, but we're doing a lot of work on mindset, a lot of work on skills, a lot of work on managing expectations in our company at the moment, and a lot of work on digital. That's the future. Someone said to me the other day, you're worried about agents that, maybe the industry collapses and computers sell to people and artificial intelligence. Well, who knows what happens in 50 years, but I know certainly for the rest of my lifetime that good agents that know their stuff and can give people the right guidance and advice and support them and reassure them, literally hold their hand through the process, are going to have a role to play. I think great agents with great people skills and great technology supporting them to help them leverage what they do is the way of the future.
So it's interesting what you say there about AREC and putting a bit of a counterintuitive hat on. Often when you think you can't afford to do something, that's actually when you need to do it most. And I remember Pete Sheehan saying that at AREC last year. Sometimes you've got to think about the outcome as something as, what if I don't go? So AREC is coming up fast and there's some really interesting people on the program. So tell us a bit about your themes for AREC this year.
Well, the words we're using are connect, think, innovate and grow. And we sat down one day and we said, okay, what's really important and why has AREC been such a great event? Well, the connecting bit, and I look at connecting is about meeting other people and being in the same room as greatness. Because I remember years ago I went to NAR in the States and Bill Clinton was on the stage. I needed binoculars. I was that far back. I was like 200 metres back because the room was huge. But bottom line was I felt being in the same room as an iconic person, and I thought, wow, this kind of feels like my life is changing. And I think AREC's like that. When you're in a room and there's James Tostovan in the front row and there's Gavin Rubinstein at the coffee station and so forth, you're listening to these great people and you rub shoulders with Tommy Panos and Matt Steinway. When all this stuff happens, I think there is an opportunity in that physical space and energetic space to leverage that to change your life. So the connect bit is actually the physicality of being there, because you can watch some great speakers on YouTube, and I think you should do that as well, and you can listen to podcasts like this, but the connect bit is there. The think bit is giving yourself that space, because often we're in work mode or we're in relaxation home mode. So when we're home, hopefully you turn off your devices and then you go busy mode. So this creates a third place where you're not distracted, hopefully, by the day-to-day busyness, but you're still in work mode. And I think that's the really beautiful space. And a lot of people, I think, are very intelligently spending a couple of days after the event there on the Gold Coast, sometimes with their family, sometimes with their team. We've had people who said, our whole team is going to stay and we're booking a hotel the next day and we're going to go through everything. Innovate's an interesting word. It probably feels a bit cliche, but reality is things are changing and you have to redesign the way you do business. And that's physically with around technology, and it's emotionally around how you deal with the current market. And just grow. I mean, I think growing is what's exciting. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about the disease of when When I got the big car, when I pay off the mortgage, I'll feel good. When I've got $1 million in the bank, I'll feel safe. When I've made 100 sales, I'll feel successful. And it's a real trap because a lot of people, they push away all the good experiences and good feelings of the day-to-day progress in the hope that one day when they reach Mecca, there's going to be some amazing lightning bolt of good feeling and they're going to say, wow, it was all worth it. And most people that have kind of ever achieved most of their greatest goals realise that there is no great lightning bolt and it's kind of the day-to-day stuff you need to focus on. So the growth bit is every single day we've got a chance to get better. The market we're in is giving an even greater gift because the market we're in now requires you to get better every day and reassess the way you do things. So Connect, Think, Innovate, Grow is the theme. So the speakers are all across that. They'll all deliver a piece of that in their own personal way.
One of those is Barbara Corcoran, who famously turned $1,000 into a multi-billion-dollar business in Corcoran Group. And she's a fascinating character, and I guess there's some parallels there because you were the real estate property person on Shark Tank, and so was she, and she became very famous doing that. Do you know her?
I wouldn't say I know her well, but I had the pleasure of meeting her when she still owned the company. So some people, you can Google the story about her, but basically she was a young female real estate agent in a very male-dominated, tough market of New York City. All the agents were men, and here was this literally 20-something young woman, and she was trying to get ahead. And, of course, she did. History tells us she sold her business for about $100 million 20 years ago. So call that 400 or 500 million today, probably. And it's gone on from there, which I think is always a good sign when the legacy, once she stepped out, it didn't collapse, it kept growing. And then she went on Shark Tank and she definitely become far more famous off the back of that. So I met her in New York because I'd watched the rise of her business and I watched her and I just sent an email and I went across and she said, yep, come and have a coffee, and met her. And subsequent to that, she spoke at one of our leadership events, which was phenomenal. The feedback was just outstanding. I wanted to get her here for a couple of years, but just, reality is her diary is so packed for the whole year, other than the time she carves out for home time and for leisure time. She's hard to get into. She's a wonderful person. She's no bullshit. She will tell it warts and all. She won't sugarcoat anything. She's got great energy. I think she's probably doing her best work now. So if you're kind of at the twilight of your career and you want to be inspired by that, come along. If you're at the beginning of your career and you want to hear about someone that in her 20s became competitive in a market she had no right to be competitive in because it was people that are 30 years ahead of her, more experienced and probably to some degree tougher, but she's very tough.
But you have to be in New York selling real estate. I love a story where someone can take challenges and them really being opportunities, and the opportunity of taking $1,000 and turning it into that sort of a company doesn't come along all the time. It usually comes in the face of...
Well, the opportunity's there, but very few people actually, A, take it, and B, if they take it, make it work, because between where you are now and where you want to be, there's inevitable challenges and hurdles to jump, but she did it. We're beaming her in live stream. Tommy will give her a really great fireside chat for an hour, and I think we will extract some amazing things from her.
You have this gift, it seems, of picking people that we don't really know that much and they end up being very awesome. So can you tell us a bit about, well, I've followed James Clear for a while. He's got some amazing messages.
Well, he wrote that great book called Atomic Habits, and before that he was an unknown, and he certainly is not an unknown in America today. In this country, he's pretty much an unknown. So he was just a guy who's a photographer, just an average dude, was interested in self-development and growth, and he thought the best way to get ahead is to study what all the best people in the world in sports, politics, business have done, and if I can, interview them. If I can't, just observe them and read about them. And he kind of talks about the art and science of success and habits. And he said there's got to be a bit of artistic stuff there because it's about people and energy, but there's also got to be a way to unpack it scientifically and actually break down what do they do in their day and how do they do it and what do they do prior to a sales call and so forth. He's done that. He talks about a lot about one percenters. He created this great New York Times best-selling book, and people just rave about it because it actually gives them a real insight. So I want to know what he says, because he'll probably talk about some of the stuff in the book, but he's also said he's going to talk about some of the stuff that's not in his book. There's been other personal observations. So I want to know, when he was in the presence of greatness, what were some of the things that really were fascinating that stuck with him?
Scott Dutton looks like an interesting kind of character.
I don't know him. I've spoken to him a number of times. I haven't met him yet, so AREC will be the first time I get to meet him. Right now, one of the greatest challenges is sort of dealing with the environment we're in at the moment and the negativity and the ability to sort of manage expectations. So I kind of looked around and I looked overseas. There was someone in the States that had been quite famous, written about fierce conversations. And when you say fierce, it's not about being aggressive or cutting people down. You need to have the conversations that are probably a bit uncomfortable to get to a place where everyone wins. If you're sitting there and you're having a chat and you know the price is overpriced, but you don't want to have that conversation and it's going along swimmingly, the chat, and you think, I just won't say anything. So I was looking for someone that could coach us on how do you have those courageous conversations, not with a view to creating an adversarial relationship, but with a view to actually the opposite, bringing together. How do you start them? How do you get over that initial fear? How do you open up the conversation? And I just found out through my research and talking to a number of my friends that we have one of the world's great experts on it here in Australia. So I sent him an email and he said, yes, I'm free and I live at the Gold Coast and I'd love to talk to the real estate industry because I kind of haven't done that before. And I could understand, watching what's happening in the real estate industry, why courageous conversations are really critical now. I was interviewing on that podcast that we do internally about 6 months ago, Pete Chauncey, just after he'd sold those 30 properties. I said, Pete, what are some of the strategies? He said, I'm like everyone. I was sitting there swimmingly going along. Things were selling by themselves. Then the market shifted and then all of a sudden things were harder. And he said, I thought every vendor deserves to hear the truth. And he said, that changed my world of thinking because it's not like he ever didn't tell the truth, but sometimes the truth was easy to tell and sometimes the truth's not easy to tell. And if the truth's not easy to tell, a lot of people don't tell it.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked the question, when is John going to speak at AREC again? Because you've left it to other people over the last few years.
I have. I try and do little tidbits if I can, and I'm very open to coming back and doing a full presentation. In fact, it might be timely to do it. I'd spoken every year for probably 15, 16 in a row, and I didn't want people to get sick of me. I didn't want to overexpose myself to the same audience because every year about 50% of the previous year's audience comes back. That's a little bit more than that. I feel like maybe it might be next year.
So let's talk about a few of the things that are going on right now. And you and I have talked about the subject of tech disruption over the years. There are other challenges / opportunities out there over the next 12 months. And you've made some changes within McGrath over the last 12 months. You've hired a head of digital for the first time.
Yeah.
And you've also just launched this app for property managers that's getting a bit of chatter. So tell me about your thoughts around technology and real estate agents.
I think setting aside the detail, because there's different apps and different platforms, I think technology is going to be one of the key enablers for you to massively grow your business. In fact, I think it's a non-negotiable. I had a session yesterday with our 3 heads of sort of the marketing area. There was Ryan as head of marketing technology, Grant and Trent, and Ross, their kind of head of brand and social. Because we see digital and now social as becoming a critical way, not just to sell your brand and as an agent, but also to sell your property. So it's becoming an interesting complement to things like REA and Domain. So we're having these conversations daily. We've just made some shifts in property management. You know, this is now, I'm holding up my mobile phone here, this is now your office. This or an iPad is becoming for most people the equivalent of an office. So you've got to have things that don't just work on a desktop, but to actually work on the palm of your hand. So we're looking at that. We're looking at the Tradies app because one of the great wastes of time and causes of frustration, both for tenants, landlords and agents, is the ability to get maintenance done quickly, efficiently at the right prices. There are tech solutions out there. So why does someone have to ring up, leave a message for a property manager? Property manager then rings back. They pay telephone tag for 2 days. They then eventually find a plumber and so on and so forth. So we're testing the Tradies app at the moment internally, and that's early days. We've only just literally launched it, but it's looking really positive. And if it's not positive, it'll lead us to something that is positive. Sometimes you've got to go slightly down the wrong road of technology to get back on the right road. And I think we're confident in this app. We're confident in the property management platform. But the reality is you've got to be jumping in with some form of technology that feels right for you at the moment.
And the new head of digital that you've just hired, he's not from the real estate industry.
So we've got people from retail, from fast-moving consumable goods. We've got people from other service industries. A couple of our key guys have had a long time at McDonald's, which a lot of people say, what's the difference? Well, McDonald's are probably the world's best systems and processes providers. You know, they make 1 billion burgers a day and they're all the same and they're all cost about the right price and they all arrive in 60 seconds. And they all taste about the same. I'm not saying it's the world's greatest food, but I'm saying it's a great system. Grant comes from those backgrounds, head of our marketing in general. You know, Ross has had some exposure. He worked a number of years ago for one of the big franchise groups, but has then gone off and worked in other types of industries. A lot of people say, oh, I can't find the right talent in the real estate space. Well, nowadays it's about the right talent in the service space or the system space or the technology space. Real estate's a pretty simple product. It's not that complex.
I know you do like to look at 5-10 years yourself. How do you see the consumer of real estate in 2025? So what will that person that is either buying, selling, renting demand of the agents that represent them?
So I reckon, Sam, nowadays I look at more 3 than 5 and 10 because I think so much is changing. Who knows what 10 is going to look like and even 5. But the next few years, let's call it 3. I think real time, extreme convenience, like people want stuff now. They don't want to wait till this afternoon. They actually want to be able to self-serve most of the time. So they want to be able to get off your website predominantly or your social media page. They want to be able to get the stuff they need easy, intuitively, quickly. Then when they want you, they will let you know. I was talking to one of our guys this morning and I said, why aren't you using a price guide? And he said, oh, look, I usually do them in the second week, but the first week I like to get the inquiry in and that kind of builds up my database of buyers. And I said, I understand what you're doing and it's probably better than most. The fact that you're putting a price guide on week 2, 3 and 4 is probably better than most of the industry as an auction property. Probably never puts one on. But I said, here's a problem that you are pissing off buyers because people are looking at it and saying, that looks really great. I wonder if I could afford it. I'm pretty busy. I've got to go now. So anyway, I'll probably miss it. And that's kind of what happens. So I'm saying extreme convenience in real time has to become the benchmark. And the only way you'll be able to deliver that is going to be technology. So I think people's expectations are going up. I mean, Uber now, it's like, 3 minutes is the average wait time, whereas taxis, I remember ringing up in the old days and they'd say, look, we'll be there within the 30 minutes and 20 minutes. If you're getting 3-minute Uber pickups as opposed to 20 to 30-minute taxi rides, and if you're getting self-serve everything and you're getting burgers in 30 seconds, and in real estate, people want home loans, they want styling, they want ads to come out, they want to see the property faster, and you're either going to accommodate all that or you're not. And if you're not, you're going to be swamped by the agents that are. So I think technology, convenience, integrity and authenticity, I think there's still too many agents out there telling half-truths. And I don't say they're bald-faced liars, some might be, but most of them are kind of think, well, just like my guy said this morning, he works in one of our offices and he said, well, I just want to get it out first, then I'll get the feedback and then I'll kind of put a price guide up week 2. To me, that feels a bit too tricky. It's a bit cute. I mean, sure, there are some properties, I've sold many myself, where it's really hard to find out what they're worth week 1. But that's 10%. The other 90%, you sold the next door, you sold the one across the back fence, it's sort of 780 to 850, it's somewhere in that range. So we don't need to make up stories that we don't know what it's worth. If I'm selling a church in the middle of Surrey Hills and it's the only ones that have been sold this decade, it's a different conversation. They'd be some of the key things I think are going to change.
I think it's interesting because knowing you were coming in this morning, I got out the book that you wrote called You Inc., which is a classic, and you look very young on the...
Which means I look very old today.
No,
I think that's a...
You still don't look a day over fabulous to me. We've been looking at some of these strategies to turbocharge your business, and I think there are 10 here, and the only thing that's probably hasn't changed is you've used the word Rolodex. Let's play it out. So 10 strategies to turbocharge your business. See more qualified customers face-to-face. Tick. Like that still
as relevant today as it was then.
Send information in advance of meetings. We just talked about that. Mm-hmm. Expand your Rolodex. Let's just replace
CRM
that with database. Yep. Use technology.
Different technology.
Take more shots.
Yep.
Get aligned.
So take more shots is just set aside your fear and just put yourself out there, and it's equally relevant today.
Yeah, actually, when you were talking about James Clear, it did occur to me that he has a strategy of saying, I am, not that waiting for when you're going to feel better or when you're going to feel more confident. You need to actually say
That's right. It's about identity, Sam. I mean, if your identity is, and I hear it when I'm coaching people, oh, well, I'm not an aggressive, pushy salesman. I said, fantastic, but you can still be a proactive salesperson and help people make better decisions. So that's the I am bit for sure.
Yeah. Get aligned. So obviously that's crucial in your conversations. Positive feedback loop.
Building momentum upon momentum, and all of a sudden 5% can become 30% quickly.
Yeah. Don't let perfect get in the way of better.
Mm-hmm.
Be a profit mechanic.
Yep.
And continually reinvent your business.
Well, the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
I haven't looked at that. Funny, I haven't looked at that list for a while, but in the next 10 years, many things like that list will probably stay the same. You've still got to be a good person. You've got to deal with integrity and ethics, and you've got to be organised and blah, blah, blah. But there is going to be some new stuff called technology, digital, social, which is not new, but it's going to become more and more embedded within your sales routine.
So if you were going to rewrite this book, or if you were going to put out a new edition, the 2020 edition, let's call it, the 2020 edition, is there anything that you would change or
I changed Rolodex to CRM database.
Yeah.
Look, a bit like the chat today, I think that there's, the more things change, the more they say the same.
There's some fantastic things to look forward to at AREC this year. And as always, I've loved chatting with you this morning. If there was one thing that you would like everyone to remember as a result of listening to this podcast, what would it be?
We chatted earlier about the journey versus the destination. And I think real estate is, of all the industries I've observed, probably where that is the most important, where every single day is going to have good things and sometimes bad things and wins and challenges. You have to learn to enjoy it every day. Because if, like me, I've been in it like 37 years or something, if you intend or have been or intend to be in it a long time, you can't wait until you become $1 million agent or a 100 sale a year guy or girl. You've actually got to say, okay, I love helping people, which is what I love. I have a passion to serve. I have a passion to coach. I love sharing information and educating. So therefore, I get the opportunity in this industry every day to do that. And that's where the joy's got to be. Now, I reckon if you're really damn good at it, there'll be money that flows off the back of that. So just focus on that. Get rid of the disease of when, or the curse of when, and just enjoy that every day. And that's what pretty much AREC is about, is putting in front of you people that are living this.
We'll be up there giving away socks and all sorts of things.
I like that.
So an event we always look forward to. John McGrath, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam.
To subscribe to the magazine, visit eliteagent.com.au/subscribe.